The Adena culture flourished in the Ohio Valley, defined by their monumental earthworks and extensive trade networks.
Let's journey back in time, not just a few hundred years, but 3,000. We're heading to a world long before the concrete jungles and bustling highways of today. Our destination is the Ohio River Valley, around the year 1000 BCE. Picture it, a land untouched, a vast expanse of green stretching as far as the eye can see. This isn't just an empty wilderness. It's a living, breathing world. Imagine standing at the edge of a dense forest as the morning sun begins to pierce through the canopy. The air is cool and damp, thick with the scent of wet earth, decaying leaves, and pine. A low-lying mist clings to the ground, weaving through the trunks of ancient oaks, hickories, and towering tulip poplars, like a ghostly river. The silence here is profound, but it's a living silence, punctuated by the distant chatter of a squirrel or the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. Through this verdant landscape, a great river carves its path, the Ohio River, or Ohi, Yo, as it would later be called, meaning the Great River. It doesn't rush. It meanders, a wide, powerful ribbon of silver reflecting the sky. Its surface is calm, almost mirror-like in the early light, disturbed only by the gentle rings of a fish breaking the surface or the silent glide of a canoe. Its tributaries, like veins in a leaf, branch out, winding through the woods, creating fertile floodplains and marshy backwaters teeming with life. Life is everywhere. Flocks of passenger pigeons, so numerous they would have darkened the sky for hours, roost in the trees. White-tailed deer move like phantoms through the dappled sunlight, their coats blending perfectly with the forest floor. A black bear, heavy and deliberate, ambles along a creek bed, searching for berries. In the rivers and streams, freshwater mussels pave the bottom, filtering the clear water, while massive catfish and sturgeon patrol the depths. Overhead a bald eagle circles, its sharp eyes scanning the water below. This is a world in perfect, delicate balance. And what about people? They are here, too. For thousands of years, small, nomadic groups of hunter-gatherers have called this valley home. They are the descendants of the first peoples who walked this continent, living in intimate connection with the land. They followed the seasons, moving with the herds of deer and elk, knowing where the best nuts and berries grow and when the fish runs are strongest. Their lives are woven into the fabric of this place. They build temporary shelters from saplings and bark, leaving little trace when they move on. Their tools are crafted from what the land provides. Sharp flint for spear points, and knives, bone for needles and awls, and wood for everything from boughs to bowls. Their understanding of this world is deep and encyclopedic. They know the properties of every plant which ones can heal, which can be eaten, and which are to be avoided. They understand the patterns of the stars, the behavior of the animals, and the rhythms of the river. They live in small, family-based groups. Their social world is intricate and connected as the ecosystem around them. Knowledge is passed down through generations, not in books, but in stories told around a crackling fire, in songs sung under a canopy of stars, and in the quiet observation of elders teaching the young. Their spiritual world is inseparable from the natural world. The rustling leaves, the flowing river, the cry of a hawkle are imbued with meaning and spirit. They are not masters of this land, but a part of it, living in a relationship of respect and reciprocity. Life is not easy. It requires constant effort, skill, and a bit of luck. A harsh winter, a failed hunt, or a sudden flood could bring hardship. But it is also a life of profound freedom and connection, a life measured not by the accumulation of possessions, but by the richness of experience and the strength of community. As we stand here, on the cusp of 1000 BCE, we are witnessing the final moments of this long chapter of human history in the Ohio Valley. The world is quiet, stable, and deeply traditional. But change is coming. It's not a sudden storm, but a slow, almost imperceptible shift, like the turning of a season. New ideas are beginning to take root, like seeds scattered on the wind. People are starting to experiment with cultivating native plants like squash, sunflower, and goosefoot, supplementing their hunted and gathered foods. This small change will have enormous consequences. The ability to grow food, even in small gardens, allows people to stay in one place for longer. Settlements, once temporary, are becoming more permanent. With a more stable food source, populations can begin to grow, and with more people living together, new social structures and new ways of thinking are bound to emerge. The seeds of a new culture are being sown in the fertile soil of the Ohio River Valley. A revolution is brewing, but it's a quiet one. It's a revolution of ideas, of spirituality, and of community. Something new is stirring in the hearts and minds of the people who call this tranquil land home. They are beginning to look at their world in a different way, to ask new questions, and to express themselves in new forms. They're on the verge of creating something monumental, something that will leave a permanent mark on the landscape and echo through the millennia. The quiet lands are about to get a little less quiet. The age of the great mounds is dawning. The people we will come to know as the Adena are about to step onto the stage of history, and they will transform this world forever. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. It's a story I'm incredibly excited to share with you. If you found this fascinating, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Hitting that notification bell ensures you won't miss the next chapter, where we'll witness the rise of the very first mound builders. Your support makes all of this possible. Thanks again, and see you next time. Have you ever driven through the rolling hills of Ohio, Kentucky, or West Virginia and noticed these massive, mysterious earthen mounds dotting the landscape? They're not just natural hills. They are ancient monuments, silent storytellers from a time long past. For centuries, these structures puzzled settlers and early explorers. Who built them? And why? When American pioneers first moved into the Ohio Valley, they were stumped. These mounds were everywhere, some conical, some shaped like animals, others forming vast geometric enclosures. They were clearly man-made. But the sheer scale and complexity seemed beyond the capabilities of the local Native American tribes they encountered. This led to a whirlwind of wild speculation. Early theories were like something out of a fantasy novel. People proposed that a lost race of giants, or perhaps Vikings, or even wandering tribes from ancient Israel had built them. The idea of a vanished, superior civilization was popular because, frankly, it fit the romantic and often prejudiced views of the time. Many would unbelieve that the ancestors of contemporary Native Americans were responsible for such sophisticated engineering. This mound builder myth persisted for decades, fueling amateur digs that often did more harm than good. As treasure hunters looted artifacts without any scientific the mounds were seen as curiosities, not as sacred ancestral sites. But as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, a more scientific approach began to take hold. Archaeologists, rather than treasure hunters, started to systematically investigate the mounds. They weren't looking for gold, they were looking for answers. They carefully excavated, layer by layer, documenting everything they found: pottery shards, stone tools, and, crucially, human remains. One of the most important sites was a large mound on the estate of an early Ohio governor named Thomas Worthington. His estate was called Adena, a name supposedly derived from a Hebrew word meaning a delightful place. It was here, during excavations in the early 1900s, that archaeologists identified a distinct set of artifacts and burial practices that were consistently found together in similar mounds across the region. They saw unique, leaf-shaped spear points, stone tablets with intricate carvings, and a particular style of pottery. They also noted specific burial customs, like including ceremonial objects with the deceased. This pattern was so consistent that archaeologists realized they were looking at the footprint of a single, unified culture. To give this newly identified culture a name, they borrowed from the location of that pivotal discovery. And so, the Adena Culture was born. This was the name the people called themselves. We'll likely never know that. But it was a label that allowed researchers to finally start piecing together the story of the Ohio Valley's first monumental builders. The naming of the Adena was a huge step. It moved the conversation away from lost races and Vikings and firmly toward the indigenous history of the Americas. Scientists began to demonstrate, through careful analyses of skeletons and artifacts, that the people buried in the mounds were in fact the ancestors of modern Native Americans. The evidence was undeniable. So, who were the Adena people? They were pioneers in their own right. Flourishing from around 800 BC to 81, they were among the first cultures in this region to transition from a purely nomadic, hunter-gatherer lifestyle to a more settled existence. While they still hunted and gathered, they also began to cultivate native plants like squash, sunflower, and goosefoot. This more stable food supply allowed them to stay in one place longer, invest in building communities, and develop complex social and ceremonial lives. Their mounds were at the heart of this ceremonial life. The most common type you'll see is the conical burial mound. These weren't just random piles of dirt. They were sacred spaces, often built overtop a circular wooden structure that would have served as a charnel house or a location for funeral rituals. Imagine a ceremony taking place. The community gathers as a respected leader is laid to rest. The body might be coated in red ochre, a pigment symbolizing life. Alongside them are placed beautifully crafted stone pipes for smoking sacred tobacco, copper bracelets from the Great Lakes, and shells from the Gulf of Mexico. This tells us the Adena were part of a vast trade network, connected to people and places hundreds, even thousands of miles away. After the rituals were complete, the wooden structure would be burned, and the construction of the mound would begin. Basketful by basketful, people would carry earth to cover the sacred spot, slowly building the mound over days, weeks, or even generations. Each layer of earth represented an act of remembrance, a connection between the living and the dead, the earth and the sky. Some of these mounds grew to be enormous. The Miamisburg Mound in Ohio, for example, is over 65 feet tall, the largest conical mound in the state. Imagine the social organization required to build something like that without modern machinery. It speaks to a society with strong leaders, shared beliefs, and a powerful sense of community purpose. By studying the Adena, we get a glimpse into the dawn of settled life in eastern North America. They weren't just building mounds. They were building society. They were developing the intricate social structures, long-distance trade routes, and complex belief systems that would lay the groundwork for the even more elaborate Hopewell culture that followed them. The journey from seeing mysterious hills to understanding them as the sacred monuments of the Adena people is a story about archaeology itself. It's a shift from romantic fantasy to scientific fact, and a long overdue recognition of the incredible ingenuity and deep history of the indigenous peoples of America. These mounds are not the relics of a lost race. They are the enduring legacy of the continent's first architects. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into our ancient past. Let me know in the comments if you've ever seen one of these mounds in person. See you next time. Have you ever wondered where historical names come from? Sometimes, the story behind a name is just as fascinating as the history it represents. Today, we're digging into the origin of the name Adena, a term that defines a remarkable prehistoric culture in North America. Spoiler alert, it has nothing to do with what these ancient people called themselves. Instead, it's tied to a place, a specific piece of land with a rather poetic name. Our story begins in the early 20th century, on a beautiful estate overlooking the Scioto River Valley in Ohio. This estate was called Adena, and it belonged to Thomas Worthington, one of Ohio's first senators and its sixth governor. Worthington was a prominent figure in early American politics, a contemporary of Thomas Jefferson, and a man deeply interested in the landscape around him. His home, a stunning Georgian mansion designed by the same architect who worked on the U.S. Capitol, was the centerpiece of a sprawling property. But what makes this estate central to our story isn't the mansion itself, but what lay upon its grounds: a large, conical earthen mound. Worthington chose the name Adena for his estate, drawing from a Hebrew word he believed meant a delightful place or a place of pleasure. It's a fitting name for the rolling hills and scenic vistas of his property. For years, this large mound, now known as the Adena Mound, was simply a prominent feature of the landscape. Local folks knew about it, of course, as they did the hundreds of other earthworks that dotted the Ohio Valley. But it wasn't until 1901 that its secrets began to be revealed. In Dachier, the Ohio State Archaeological and Historical Society, under the direction of its curator, William C. Mills, decided to conduct a formal excavation of the mound on Worthington's former estate. This wasn't some haphazard treasure hunt. It was one of the first systematic, scientific archaeological digs of a mound in the region. The team approached the project with a level of care and documentation that was, for its time, quite advanced. They weren't just looking for artifacts. They were trying to understand the structure of the mound and the context of what they found inside. Imagine the scene. A team of men with shovels and wheelbarrows, carefully slicing into this ancient structure, peeling back layers of earth that had been untouched for nearly 2,000 years. As they dug deeper, they began to uncover something extraordinary. The mound wasn't just a pile of dirt. It was a complex, layered burial monument. Inside, Mills and his team discovered a large, central tomb constructed from logs. Within this tomb lay the remains of an individual, clearly a person of great importance. This was no ordinary burial. The body had been wrapped in bark and adorned with an astonishing array of artifacts. There were thousands of beads crafted from marine shells, indicating trade networks that stretched all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. There were spear points made of high kawali, flint, finely crafted stone gorgets, and bracelets made of copper, another material sourced from distant lands, likely the Great Lakes region. But the most iconic artifact, the one that would become a symbol of this entire culture, was found with this burial. It was a small, tubular pipe, expertly carved from Ohio pipestone in the effigy of a human figure. The figure is depicted with ear spools, a loincloth, and a distinctive hairstylist snapshot of a person from a long-lost world. This effigy pipe, now famously known as the Adena pipe, is considered a masterpiece of prehistoric art. It gave archaeologists a face, however stylized, to associate with the people who built these mounds. The Adena mound was a treasure trove of information. The excavation revealed multiple burials at different levels, suggesting the mound was built in stages over time. Each burial contained its own set of grave goods, offering clues about the social structure and belief systems of its builders. They found textiles, preserved by contact with copper salts, giving a rare glimpse into the fabrics these people wore. They found mica cutouts, shimmering sheets of mineral from the Appalachian Mountains, carved into intricate shapes. The richness and complexity of the findings of this single mound were stunning. It was clear that this was not the work of a simple, nomadic group. These were the traces of a settled, sophisticated society with complex rituals, extensive trade networks, and skilled artisans. Because this excavation was so thorough and so well documented, it became a benchmark. As archaeologists found similar mounds and artifacts throughout the Ohio Valley and beyond in Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, they needed a way to classify them. They recognized a shared set of characteristics. Conical burial mounds, specific artifact types like the leaf-shaped blades and tubular pipes, and distinct burial practices. What to call this pattern of culture? They named it after the site where it was first scientifically identified and defined, the Adena estate. And so, the Adena culture was born. The name had nothing to do with the people themselves, and everything to do with the place where their story was first brought into the light of modern science. It's a name derived from a governor's poetic choice for his farm, which by a twist of fate sat atop a window into the ancient past. So, when you hear the term Adena, remember it's a label of convenience, a historical tag. The people themselves would have had their own name, a name lost to time. But the legacy of William Mill's excavation on that delightful place in Chillicothe gave us a handle, a way to begin understanding and piecing together the story of these foundational peoples of eastern North America. The name itself is a reminder that history is often uncovered in layers, not just in the ground, but in the very words we use to describe it. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the meaning of Adena. It's incredible how a single name can connect a Hebrew word, an Ohio governor, and a forgotten, ancient culture. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys into the past. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you might have. We'll see you in the next chapter. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, in Chapter 4, we step into the misty forests of the eastern woodlands to discover the quiet, rhythmic life of the Adena people. Imagine a world thousands of years ago where the sun filters through a dense canopy of oak, hickory, and maple, dappling the forest floor. Here, nestled in small clearings, often near the gentle bend of a river, lie the villages of the Adena. These weren't bustling cities, but intimate communities, clusters of homes that speak to a life lived in harmony with nature. Picture their houses, circular structures, their frames formed from young, flexible saplings, bent and tied together at the top to create a sturdy, domed roof. This framework was then covered with layers of bark or woven mats, providing shelter from the rain and a cozy refuge from the cool woodland nights. A central fire pit would have glowed within, its smoke curling up through an opening in the roof, a hearth that was the heart of the family. Life for the Adena was dictated by the seasons, a continuous dance of provision and preparation. As dawn broke, the village would stir. The men, skilled hunters, would prepare their tools, finely chipped stone spear points hafted onto long wooden shafts, and the atlatl, or spear thrower, an ingenious device that allowed them to launch their spears with incredible force and accuracy. They would move silently through the forest, their senses attuned to the slightest sound or movement, tracking white-tailed deer, elk, and bear. They knew the animal paths, their watering holes, and their habits, a knowledge passed down through generations. A successful hunt was a communal victory, providing not just meat for sustenance, but also hides for clothing and blankets, and bone and sinew for tools and cordage. While the hunters were in the forest, others would turn to the abundant generosity of the woodlands and rivers. The forest was a vast larder. In the spring and summer, women and children would gather wild plants and their greens, sweet berries, and nutritious roots. As summer turned to autumn, their focus would shift to harvesting nuts, walnuts, and hickory, nuts a vital source of protein and fat that could be stored and used throughout the long winter months. The rivers and streams were just as generous. Using nets woven from plant fibers and hooks carved from bone, they would catch fish, turtles, and freshwater mussels, adding another layer of diversity to their diet. But the Adena were not just hunters and gatherers. They were among the pioneers of agriculture in this region. In small, cultivated gardens near their homes, they began to experiment with growing native plants. They tended to squash, gourds, and sunflowers. This wasn't large-scale farming as we know it today, but these gardens represented a profound shift. They offered a more predictable food source, a supplement to what they could find in the wild. This early horticulture allowed them to stay in one place for longer periods, fostering the growth of their villages and their unique culture. Their relationship with the natural world was one of deep connection and respect. The forest wasn't just a place to find food. It was a living entity, a provider, and the source of everything they needed. The rivers weren't just waterways. They were lifelines, offering sustenance and pathways for travel in dugout canoes, carved from massive tree trunks. This profound connection is reflected in their art and rituals, which we'll explore later. They understood the rhythms of the earth, the cycles of growth and decay, and they saw themselves as part of this intricate web of life, not separate from it. Imagine the sounds of an Adena village at the end of the day, the crackle of cooking fires, the murmur of voices sharing stories, the rhythmic scrape of a stone tool shaping wood, the laughter of children. It was a life of hard work and constant awareness, but also one of community, security, and a deep, abiding peace found in the heart of the ancient forest. This gentle rhythm, this balance between taking from and giving back to the land, was the foundation upon which the remarkable Adena culture was built. Thank you for joining us on this peaceful walk through the eastern woodlands. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the past, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories from history. We appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you in the next chapter. Welcome back to our journey through time. Today, we're diving into one of the most significant revolutions in human history: the birth of agriculture. Imagine a world without grocery stores, where every meal was a result of a day's search for millennia. That was reality. Our ancestors were expert foragers, intimately familiar with the rhythms of the wild. But then, something incredible began to happen. A seed of an idea, quite literally, took root. This wasn't an overnight change. It was a slow, deliberate dance between old and new ways. Picture this: a small group, perhaps returning to a favorite seasonal camp. They noticed that where they discarded seeds from last year's squash, new plants are now growing. It's a light bulb moment. They realize they can influence nature, not just react to it. This is the dawn of agriculture. Among the very first plants to be coaxed from wild to domestic were not massive fields of grain, but humble, useful crops like squash. Its hard rind made it a perfect natural container, and its flesh provided vital nutrients. Then there were sunflowers, not just for their beauty, but for their oil-rich seeds, a powerhouse of energy. Alongside these, they began cultivating native grasses, the ancestors of grains we know today, learning to select the ones with the plumpest seeds that clung tightly to the stalk, making them easier to harvest. But these early farmers didn't abandon their old ways. That would have been far too risky. What if the rains didn't come? What if pests destroyed their crops? Foraging was their safety net. They created a brilliant hybrid system, a balanced diet of cultivated crops and wild foods. They'd plant their gardens of squash and sunflowers, but still head into the forests to hunt deer, gather nuts and berries, and fish in the rivers. This was the best of both worlds. This new strategy brought something our ancestors had never truly known before: stability. For the first time, they weren't constantly on the move, following the herds or the ripening seasons. They could stay in one place for longer. This stability created a surplus, not just of food, but of the most precious resource of all time. And what did they do with this newfound time? They didn't just sit around. They invested it in their culture. With a reliable food source, communities could grow larger and more complex. People had the mental and physical energy to devote to things beyond mere survival. This is when we see an explosion in art, ceremony, and social complexity. Think of it. The hands that once spent all day gathering roots could now spend hours carving intricate figures from wood or bone. The minds that were constantly mapping out foraging routes could now develop elaborate rituals and oral histories to pass down through generations. They crafted more sophisticated pottery, not just for cooking, but for storing their precious harvest and for ceremonial use. The surplus from their gardens fueled the fires of creativity and community. These early agricultural sites are treasure troves for archaeologists. We find a fascinating mix of artifacts. Grinding stones used to process cultivated grains, sitting right next to the bones of wild animals. We find decorated pottery and ceremonial objects, clear evidence that life was becoming richer and more symbolic. It shows a people deeply connected to both the land they tamed and the wilderness that still sustained them. The shift to agriculture wasn't just about changing how people ate. It changed how they thought, how they lived together, and how they saw their place in the universe. It allowed for the development of traditions and ceremonies that strengthened community bonds. Festivals were likely tied to the planting and harvesting cycles, celebrating the fertility of the earth and giving thanks for its bounty. These shared experiences created a powerful sense of collective identity. So, the planting of those first seeds, squash, sunflowers, and native grasses was about so much more than food. It was about planting the seeds of stability, of community, of art, and of ceremony. It was a pivotal step that laid the groundwork for the villages, towns, and eventually, the cities that would follow. This ingenious balance of farming and foraging was a testament to human adaptability and creativity, a foundation upon which new worlds could be built. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration into our agricultural past. It's incredible to think about how these ancient innovations continue to shape our world today. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up. And do you not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do not miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the annals of history. Today, in Chapter 6, we delve into a story not written in books, but etched into the very landscape of the earth itself. We're talking about the great mound builders, specifically the Adena people, whose monumental earthworks still stand as silent testaments to a forgotten age. Picture this: the Ohio River Valley, over 2,000 years ago. There are no machines, no beasts of burden, just human hands, woven baskets, and an unshakable will. This is the world of the Adena, and they are about to embark on projects of an incredible scale: the construction of their sacred mounds. So, How did they do it? It began with a single act of reverence. A respected member of the community passes away, and a grave is prepared. This isn't just a simple burial. It's the foundation of something that will outlast generations. The deceased is laid to rest, often accompanied by precious items, finely crafted tools, ceremonial blades, or beautiful ornaments made of copper and mica. These weren't just possessions. They were offerings, symbols of status and spiritual significance, meant to accompany the soul on its journey. Then, the work begins. People gather not with shovels and wheelbarrows, but with simple baskets. They dig into the earth, scoop up soil clay and gravel, and carry it, basket by basket, to the burial site. Imagine the scene. A continuous line of people, young and old, men and women, each contributing their load. Each basketful is carefully placed, patad down, forming the first layer over the grave. This wasn't a quick process. It was a slow, deliberate act of communal creation. Think about the physical effort involved. A single basket might hold 30 to 40 pounds of earth. To build even a small mound, thousands upon thousands of these basket loads were required. Archaeologists have even found the evidence of this process preserved in the mounds themselves. Lenses of different colored soils, each representing a single basket load, layered one on top of the other, like the strokes of a master painter. But these mounds were not built in a single season, or even a single lifetime. They grew over time, generation after generation. As more individuals were laid to rest within the growing structure, more layers of earth were added. A mound might start as a low rise, barely a few feet high. Decades later, another important burial takes place at the same sacred spot. The community once again comes together, adding more layers, expanding the mound upwards and outwards. This process could continue for centuries. What we see today as a single, massive, conical hill is, in reality, a complex, multi-stage construction. A collective diary of a community written in soil. The Great Mound at Miamisburg, Ohio, for example, stands nearly 70 feet tall. It's estimated to contain over 55,000 cubic yards of earth. That's millions of basket loads, carried by hand, one by one. It's a staggering feat of engineering and perseverance. This wasn't just manual labor. It was a profound act of spiritual devotion. Each layer of soil wasn't just dirt. It was a prayer, a memory, a link in the chain connecting the living to their ancestors. The mound became a focal point for the community, a visible symbol of their lineage and their connection to the land. Building the mound was a way of honoring the dead, reinforcing social bonds, and creating a sacred landscape that defined their world. The very shape of the mounds, typically conical, was likely symbolic. Perhaps it represented the world mountain from their cosmology, or a pathway connecting the earthly realm with the sky world. The act of building wasn't just about piling up dirt. It was about shaping the cosmos, creating a sacred geography that mirrored their spiritual beliefs. The rhythm of the work digging, carrying, placing would have been accompanied by chants, rituals, and ceremonies, turning the construction site into a place of active worship. Imagine the social organization required to coordinate such a project. Leaders would have directed the work. Shamans would have consecrated the ground, and every member of the community would have had a role to play. It was a shared project that bound them together, strengthening their identity as a people. The mounds were, in essence, the cathedrals of their time, built not of stone and glass, but of the very earth they walked upon. When we stand before one of these ancient structures today, it's easy to see just a hill, but now you know what to look for. See the countless hands, the thousands of journeys from the riverbank to the sacred center. Hear the faint echo of a community working in unison, driven by a shared faith. Feel the weight of generations, each adding their layer to a monument that was never truly finished, but was always growing, always evolving, just like the community that built it. These earthen pyramids are more than just archaeological sites. They are monuments to human endurance, communal labor, and deep spiritual devotion. They remind us that with a shared purpose, even the simplest tools, a basket, and a strong back can be used to build wonders that stand the test of time. The Adena builders of earth left us a legacy not of gold or jewels, but of something far more enduring. Their story, told in the silent, powerful language of the land itself. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration today. If you found this journey into the past as fascinating as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories hidden in history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious. Welcome back to our journey through ancient America. Today, we delve into one of the most profound aspects of the Adena culture: their sacred burial practices. For the Adena, death wasn't an end, but a transition, a continued connection to community and kin. The mounds they built were not just tombs. They were monuments of memory, stone and earth testaments to lives lived and legacies left behind. Let's travel back over 2,000 years. Imagine standing in a clearing in the Ohio Valley. A somber, sacred ceremony is underway. The Adena honored their dead in several distinct ways, each rich with symbolism. One of the most common practices was cremation. The body was placed on a pyre, and as the flames rose, it was believed the spirit was released, transformed. The ashes and remaining bone fragments would then be collected and placed within a small log tomb or a specially prepared basin at the base of a new mound. This act wasn't about destruction. It was about purification and release. But not everyone was cremated. Log tomb burials were reserved for individuals of significant status, perhaps a respected elder, a powerful shaman, or a clan leader. These tombs were meticulously constructed. A pit would be dug, its floor lined with bark or woven mats. Then, logs were placed around the edges to form a rectangular chamber, like a small, subterranean house for the departed. The individual was laid to rest inside, often dressed in their finest regalia, surrounded by items they would need for their journey into the next world. The tomb was then covered with more logs and sealed with layers of clay and earth, the first stage of a mound that would grow over time. What truly brings these burials to life are the grave goods, personal and ceremonial items placed with the deceased. These artifacts are a direct window into the Adena worldview, their values, and their artistry. Think of them as messages sent with their loved ones. Among the most common finds are beads, thousands of them, crafted from marine shells sourced from the far-off Gulf of Mexico. Imagine the time and effort it took to drill each tiny hole, to string them together into elaborate necklaces and bracelets. These weren't just jewelry. They were symbols of wealth, trade connections, and spiritual protection. Then, there are the pipes. The Adena were master carvers, and their tubular and effigy pipes are breathtaking works of art. Carved from fine-grained Ohio pipestone, some were simple tubes, while others were sculpted into the forms of animals or even humans. The famous Adena pipe, discovered in a mound in Chillicothe, Ohio, depicts a man in ceremonial dress, a powerful figure frozen in stone. Smoking was a deeply spiritual act, a way to send prayers and thoughts to the spirit world. Placing a pipe with the deceased ensured they could continue this sacred communication. Copper was another treasured materia, mined from the Great Lakes region, hundreds of miles to the north. It was hammered into intricate shapes. There were copper bracelets that spiraled around the wrists and ankles, gordits or ceremonial breastplates, graved with symbolic designs, and even headdresses. Copper, with its radiant sheen, was likely associated with the sun and supernatural power. To be buried with such rare and beautiful objects signified immense prestige and spiritual authority. Other items tell a more personal story. We find tools like flint blades and celts, items they used in daily life. We find pigments like red ochre and graphite, perhaps used to paint the body for the burial ceremony. Small, intricately carved stone tablets with mysterious bird and serpent motifs hint at a complex cosmology we are still working to understand. Each object was chosen with intention, reflecting the person's role in the community, their skills, and their spiritual beliefs. The mounds themselves are the final chapter of the story. A single mound often contains multiple burials, added over generations. The central, primary burial of a founder or important leader might be at the very bottom. Later, secondary burials of bundled bones or cremated remains would be added to the sides or top of the mound. With each new burial, a fresh layer of earth was added, making the mound grow larger, taller, a more prominent feature on the landscape. In this way, each mound became a layered chronicle of a lineage. It was a physical manifestation of a family tree, connecting the living to their ancestors. When the Adena people looked at these earthen monuments dotting their homeland, they didn't just see hills, they saw the resting places of their grandparents, their leaders, their spiritual guides. The mounds anchored them to their land, a constant, visible reminder of their shared history and the enduring strength of their community. They told the story of a spiritual connection that transcended death, a belief that the ancestors were still present, watching over and guiding their descendants from beneath the sacred earth. These burial practices reveal a society with a deep reverence for the cycle of life and death, the effort, the artistry, and the vast trade networks required to create these burials show us a culture that was complex, well-organized, and spiritually rich. They honor their dead not by removing them from the world, but by integrating them into the very landscape they called home, ensuring their stories would be told for millennia to come. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Adena sacred burials. It is humbling to stand in the presence of these ancient mounds and feel the weight of the history they hold. If you found this journey as fascinating as I did, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more dives into our ancient past. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey into the deep past. Today, in Chapter 8, we're exploring symbols in stone and clay, uncovering the artistic soul of the Adena people. Imagine a world without written language, where every story, every belief, every ritual had to be captured in tangible form. For the Adena, this meant transforming stone, clay, copper, and shell into powerful symbols that have whispered to us across millennia. Let's start with one of their most iconic creations, the effigy pipes. These weren't just for smoking. They were masterpieces of sculpture and sacred objects. Picture a craftsman, hundreds of years before the Roman Empire, sitting by a fire. With incredible patience and skill, they take a piece of Ohio pipestone and begin to carve. Slowly, an animal emerges. Maybe it's a hawk, with its keen eyes and powerful wings, a symbol of vision and the sky world. Or perhaps it's a wolf, respected for its intelligence and community spirit. These weren't just random animals. Each one likely represented a powerful spirit, an ancestor, or a clan totem. When tobacco, a sacred plant, was smoked from these pipes, the smoke would rise, carrying prayers and thoughts to the spirit world. The act of smoking became a direct line of communication with the supernatural. Holding one of these pipes, you can almost feel the weight of the ceremonies it witnessed, the stories it helped tell. The level of detail is astonishing. The curve of a beak, the tension in a mussel, carved with simple tools, yet with a profound understanding of form and meaning. And then there's the most famous of all, the Adena man pipe. Discovered in a mound in Chillicothe, Ohio, this small, 8-inch figure is a window into the Adena world. It depicts a man, possibly a shaman or a revered leader, wearing elaborate ear spools and a distinctive feather bustle. His pose is dynamic, his features stylized but full of life. Is he dancing? Is he performing a ritual? We may never know for sure, but this single artifact speaks volumes about their social structure, their ceremonial dress, and their focus on important individuals within their society. It's a self-portrait of a people carved in stone for eternity. But the Adena's artistry wasn't limited to stone. They were also master potters, shaping the very earth beneath their feet into vessels and figures. Let's talk about clay. Adena pottery, known as Adena plain, was typically thick-walled and utilitarian, built for cooking and storage. But even in these everyday objects, we see a sense of form and function. However, it's their small clay figurines that truly capture the imagination. These figures, often just a few inches tall, are typically very abstract. They might show human forms, but often with exaggerated features or in strange postures. Unlike the detailed stone pipes, these clay figures are simpler, more elemental. Why the difference? Perhaps these were used in different contexts. Maybe they were personal charms, educational tools for children to learn about their myths, or figures used in private household rituals. Away from the grand public ceremonies where the stone pipes were used, some figurines depict women, possibly hinting at the importance of fertility, lineage, and the role of women in Adena society. Others are so abstract it's hard to tell what they represent at all. This ambiguity is fascinating. It's as if the Adena were capturing not just the physical world, but the world of dreams, spirits, and the subconscious. Each small lump of fired clay was a vessel for an idea, a whisper from a distant world of myth and ceremony that we can only glimpse. Now, let us journey beyond the local materials of stone and clay and look at the exotic treasures. The Adena valued copper and shell. The Adena were part of a vast trade network that stretched across North America. Copper, cold-hammered into thin sheets, came from the Great Lakes region, hundreds of miles to the north. Marine shells, particularly large conch shells, traveled all the way from the Gulf of Mexico. These materials weren't just beautiful, they were rare and held deep symbolic power. Copper, with its reddish gleam, was associated with the sun, with life, and perhaps with lightning. Adena artisans would cut and shape it into intricate ornaments. They made bracelets, rings, and stunning gorgets, large decorative plates worn on the chest. These weren't simple decorations. They would often cut into shapes of serpents, birds of prey, or geometric patterns. Wearing a piece of shining copper was like wearing a piece of the sun itself, a powerful statement of status and spiritual connection. Similarly, marine shell was more than just a pretty material. Coming from the distant ocean, it represented the underworld or the realm of water spirits. The smooth, white surface was a perfect canvas. The Adena would cut sections from large conch shells and engrave them with incredibly fine, swirling designs. These gorgets often feature rattlesnakes or intertwined serpents, powerful symbols in many Native American cultures representing transformation, rebirth, and the underworld. Imagine a leader or shaman adorned for a ceremony. On their chest, a gleaming copper gorget reflecting the firelight, and perhaps another gorget of engraved shell. In their earths, large copper or stone spools inturned a masterfully carved stone pipe. Every single item was a symbol, a piece of a larger cosmic story. Their clothing and adornments were a language, telling everyone present who they were, what spirits they were connected to, and what role they played in the universe. When we look at these artifacts, the stone pipes, the clay figurines, the copper cutouts, and the engraved shells, we are doing more than just admiring ancient art. We are piecing together a worldview. We see a people deeply connected to the natural world, who saw spirits and animals and power in the elements. We see a society that valued ceremony, status, and the expression of identity. And we see a vast network of trade and communication, where ideas and sacred materials flowed across the continent. Each object is a whisper, a fragment of a lost epic. A hawk-shaped pipe whispers of the sky world. A clay figure whispers of household beliefs. A copper serpent whispers of the sun's power. And an engraved shell whispers of the mysteries of the deep. Together, these symbols in stone and clay paint a vivid, if incomplete, picture of the Adena people, a world rich with art, ceremony, and a profound understanding of their place in the cosmos. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Adena artistry. It's truly humbling to connect with these ancient creators across the centuries. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more chapters in our journey through history. We'd love to have you with us. See you next time. Imagine a world without metal. No cars, no phones, no coins in your pocket. For the earliest inhabitants of North America, this was reality. But around 7,000 years ago, something incredible happened. People living near the Great Lakes, specifically Lake Superior, discovered a treasure glittering in the earth. Pure, raw copper. This wasn't just any rock. It was a metal so pure you could pick it up and start shaping it. This discovery would spark a revolution, creating vast trade networks that stretched for thousands of miles, long before the Silk Road. Today, we're journeying back in time to trace the epic story of this North American copper. We'll follow its path from the rocky shores of the northern lakes, down ancient river highways, to the skilled hands of artisans in the Ohio Valley. This is a tale of ingenuity, commerce, and artistry that connected cultures and shaped a continent. How did this raw material travel so far, and what did it become? Let's dig in. The copper deposits around Lake Superior are unique. They are the largest and purest known in the world. Ancient miners didn't need complex smelting operations. They could find large nuggets, called float copper, that had been scraped from the bedrock by glaciers and left on the surface. For larger veins, they used simple but effective techniques. They would build a fire on top of the rock and then douse it with cold water, causing the rock to crack and expose the copper within. Using heavy stone hammers, they would then break the copper free. It was grueling, back-breaking work, but the reward was immense. Archaeologists have found thousands of ancient mining pits scattered across Michigan's Kuna Peninsula and Isle Royale. These aren't just small holes. Some are elaborate trenches, evidence of organized, large-scale operations that lasted for millennia. Imagine generations of families returning to the same spots, season after season, to extract this precious red metal. They weren't just mining for themselves. They were supplying a demand that reached far beyond their own communities. The journey of this copper was just beginning. So, you have a heavy chunk of raw copper on the shores of Lake Superior. How do you get it to a trading partner 500 miles south in the Ohio Valley? The answer lies in the continent's natural infrastructure. It's rivers. The Great Lakes themselves were the first part of this superhighway. People would load their canoes' masterpieces of birch bark engineering with goods, including these valuable copper nuggets. From the lakes, they could navigate a complex network of interconnected rivers and streams. The Mississippi, the Ohio, the Illinois. These weren't just bodies of water. They were arteries of trade and communication. This journey wasn't a quick trip. It would have been a slow, mesmerizing process, likely taking place in stages. One group might travel a certain distance downriver and trade their copper with a neighboring community. That community would then carry it further, trading it for other goods like high-quality flint from Indiana, seashells from the Gulf of Mexico, or obsidian from the Rocky Mountains. It was a relay system of exchange. Each transaction, each handshake, strengthened social bonds and spread ideas, technologies, and artistic styles across the continent. This wasn't just trade, it was the lifeblood of a connected world. The copper didn't just move, it carried stories and relationships with it. After traveling hundreds of miles, passing through countless hands, a piece of Lake Superior copper might finally arrive in the heartland of the Adena Culture, in what we now call southern Ohio. The Adena people, who flourished from about 800 BC to 81, were master mound builders and incredibly skilled artisans. For them, this gleaming red metal wasn't for making everyday tools. It was sacred. It held a spiritual significance, perhaps associated with the sun, with life, or with power. Getting their hands on this material was a monumental achievement, and they treated it with the reverence it deserved. Here, in the workshops of Adena villages, the real magic happened. The copper was not melted and cast. Instead, it was worked through a process of cold, hammering, and a needle. An artisan would take a raw nugget and begin to patiently hammer it flat with a stone. As the copper is worked, it becomes hard and brittle. To make it pliable again, the artisan would heat it in a fire process called annealing and then let it cool slowly before hammering it again. Pound, heat, cool. Pound, heat, cool. It was a slow, rhythmic dance between human, fire, and metal. This painstaking process allowed them to transform a rough lump of copper into delicate, intricate works of art. The objects they created are breathtaking. They hammered the copper into thin sheets and then shaped them into a variety of forms. We find elegant bracelets that would have adorned the arms of respected individuals. We see delicate spirals and rings, perhaps worn as earrings or hair ornaments. These weren't just jewelry. They were symbols of status, identity, and connection to a wider cosmetic and spiritual world. Imagine the flash of polished copper catching the firelight during a ceremony, a powerful statement of prestige and spiritual authority. Beyond personal adornments, Adena artisans crafted objects of deep symbolic meaning. They created effigies, such as the forms of birds or other animals, that were likely central to their belief systems. Perhaps the most iconic are the crescent-shaped objects known as gorgets, which were worn on the chest. The shape itself may have represented the moon or other celestial body. They also made intricate cutouts, sometimes resembling shamanic figures or sacred symbols. These weren't just decorations. They were ritual objects, tools for connecting with the spiritual world, buried with the honored dead to accompany them on their journey to the afterlife. When we look at these artifacts, we're seeing more than just hammered metal. We're seeing the culmination of a massive, continent-spanning network. We're seeing the geologic gift of pure copper from the north, the ingenuity of the miners who extracted it, the endurance of the traders who transported it along river highways, and the sublime skill and spiritual vision of the Adena artisans who gave it its final, sacred form. Each delicate spiral, each gleaming bracelet, tells a slow, mesmerizing story of connection, faith, and the enduring human drive to create beauty and meaning from the raw materials of the earth. This vast network of trade and artistry demonstrates a level of social and economic complexity that is truly astounding. It challenges the old, simplistic views of pre-Columbian North America. This wasn't an empty wilderness, but a continent bustling with vibrant, interconnected societies. The story of copper is a testament to their sophistication and their deep understanding of their world. It's a story written not in books, but in the earth of ancient mines and in the beautiful objects left behind. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. It's incredible to think about how these ancient connections shaped the history of this continent. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into our shared past. We have so many more stories to uncover together. Until next time, stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into the fascinating world of ancient American cultures. Today, we're venturing into Chapter 10, Networks of Exchange, and we're going to unravel a story that completely shatters the myth of isolated, primitive societies. We're talking about the Adena Culture, a people who lived in the Ohio River Valley over 2,000 years ago. Now, when you picture ancient peoples, what comes to mind? Maybe small, disconnected groups just trying to survive. Well, get ready to have that image totally transformed. The Adena were not just surviving, they were thriving, and they were master networkers. Imagine this. You're an archaeologist excavating an Adena burial mound in Ohio. You're carefully brushing away centuries of soil, and you uncover something extraordinary. It's not a locally sourced arrowhead or a simple clay pot. It's a collection of large, ornate shells. But these aren't freshwater shells from the nearby river. These are marine shells, specifically whelk and conch, that could only have come from one place, the Gulf of Mexico, hundreds and hundreds of miles to the south. How did they get here? This single discovery opens up a world of questions and reveals the true, interconnected nature of the ancient Americas. These weren't just random, accidental finds. The Adena people placed immense value on these exotic materials. These Gulf Coast shells were often carved into intricate gorgets sattes, a type of ornamental pendant worn on the chest or shaped into ceremonial cups. The journey they took was incredible. Picture traders navigating the winding river systems, perhaps the Mississippi, the Tennessee, and the Ohio rivers, forming a natural highway that connected distant communities. These weren't quick trips. They were long, deliberate expeditions. The traders would have carried their own goods to exchange, participating in a relay system of trade that passed these treasured items from hand to hand, group to group, until they finally reached their destination in the heart of the Adena world. This shows us that these weren't isolated tribes. They were part of a dynamic, living web of human connection that spanned a huge portion of the continent. But the story doesn't end with shells. Let us travel in our minds to a different location. The Appalachian Mountains, in what is now North Carolina. Here, deep within the earth, you can find mica. Mica is a fascinating mineral. It naturally separates into thin, flexible, transparent sheets that glitter with a silvery sheen. It's almost like ancient plastic or glass. The Adena people cherished this material. They would acquire huge sheets of it, not just tiny flakes. And what they did with it was pure artistry. They would cut the mica into delicate, precise shapes, silhouettes of human hands, bird talons, headless figures, and other powerful symbols from their cosmology. These mica cutouts weren't just decorations. They were likely sacred objects, placed with the deceased in burial mounds as part of elaborate mortuary rituals. Think about the craftsmanship involved. These weren't made with metal tools, but with carefully sharpened stone and bone. The precision is astounding. And again, we have it to ask, how did this mica travel over 400 miles from the mountains to the river valleys of Ohio and Kentucky? It's another testament to this incredible network. The Adena had established relationships, trade partnerships, and a shared understanding of value with peoples who lived in completely different environments. They were exchanging ideas, stories, and beliefs, not just physical goods. Now, let's turn our attention westward, all the way to the Rocky Mountains, to a place we now know as Obsidian Cliff in Yellowstone National Park. Here, volcanic activity created a special kind of natural glass. Obsidian, this material was the gold standard for creating ultra-sharp tools. When you fracture obsidian, you get an edge that is many times sharper than a modern surgical scalpel. For a society without metal, this was an invaluable resource. The Adena prized this jet black, glassy rock. They would expertly craft it into magnificent ceremonial blades, sometimes over a foot long. These weren't everyday knives for skinning animals. They were masterpieces of flint and knapping, often so delicate and beautifully made that they were clearly intended for ritual purposes. Some were even intentionally killed, broken as part of a ceremony before being placed in a grave. And here's the truly mind-blowing part. We're talking about a journey of over 1,500 miles. That's like walking from New York City to Dallas. How was this possible? It speaks to a sophisticated, multi-generational system of exchange. It's likely that no single person made the entire journey. Instead, the obsidian was traded from group to group, its value increasing with every mile it traveled, until it reached the Adena heartland. So, let's put all the pieces together. We have marine shells from the Gulf Coast, glittering mica from the Appalachians, and razor-sharp obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, all converging on these ceremonial centers in the Ohio Valley. This wasn't a random collection of trinkets. This was a curated selection of sacred, high-status materials. But wait, there's more. We also find copper, sourced from the Great Lakes region to the north. The Adena and other related cultures were skilled metal workers. They would hammer and anneal, which is a process of heating and cooling the raw copper to create bracelets, beads, ear spools, and ceremonial axes, called celts. So now we've connected the Adena world to the north, south, east, and west. What does this vast network tell us? It proves that the Adena were not a simple, isolated culture. They were a central hub in a continental system of communication and commerce. This trade wasn't just about economics. It was deeply social and spiritual. The exchange of these rare and exotic goods would have been accompanied by ceremonies, gatherings, and the sharing of knowledge. It fostered alliances and created shared cultural practices across vast distances. When an Adena leader was laid to rest, they were buried with items that told a story of a connected continent. Their grave goods were a map of their world, a physical representation of their influence and the relationships they maintained. These items, the shells, the mica, the obsidian, the copperware, the luxury goods of their day, they signified power, prestige, and a connection to the sacred. The ability to acquire these materials meant you were an important person, part of a lineage that had far-reaching influence. It was the Adena equivalent of having a collection of treasures from around the world. It showed that you were a citizen of a much larger, interconnected universe than just your local village. The mounds themselves, where these objects are found, can be seen as monuments to this very interconnectedness. They are not just tombs. They are symbols of a culture that looked outward, that valued relationships, and that built a society on a foundation of exchange. This understanding completely changes how we should view the history of this land. North America before European contact wasn't an empty wilderness, dotted with a few isolated tribes. It was a bustling, dynamic continent, woven together by ancient highways of rivers and footpaths, vibrant with trade, diplomacy, and shared ritual life. The Adena people were key players in this continental drama, their influence radiating outward and drawing in the very essence of distant lands. Their legacy, buried in the earth, is a powerful reminder that human beings have always sought connection, have always built networks, and have always looked beyond the horizon to see what lies beyond. The story of the Adena is a story of a living, breathing web of connection, a testament to a rich and complex chapter in human history. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the Adena's world of exchange. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into our shared past. Ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. See you next time. Step back in time with me. Not just a few centuries, but over 2,000 years. Journey into the heart of ancient North America, into the world of the Adena people. We're not just looking at artifacts. We're trying to understand the soul of a culture, their ceremonial life, a world of ritual and deep meaning that echoed through the forests of the Ohio Valley. Today, all that remains are their monumental earthworks, silent mounds that rise from the landscape like sleeping giants. But these weren't just random piles of dirt. Archaeologists believe these were sacred centers, the heartbeats of Adena communities. Imagine, if you will, a vast circular enclosure, a perfectly crafted ring of earth, hundreds of feet across. This wasn't a fortress for war. It was a stage for ceremony. Picture this: a procession of people, their faces illuminated by the flickering orange glow of torches. They move with a slow, deliberate rhythm, their path tracing the curve of the earthen wall. Perhaps their faces are painted with symbolic designs, their bodies adorned with beads made from shell and copper, materials brought from hundreds of miles away. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. What were they thinking? What were they feeling? Were they marking a solstice, honoring an ancestor, or initiating a new generation into the mysteries of their tribe? We can imagine the low, resonant sound of chanting drifting through the forest night, a collective voice rising and falling in unison. The sounds of wooden rattles and bone flutes might have punctuated the rhythm, creating a soundscape that was both hypnotic and powerful. These weren't just random noises. Each sound, each note, would have carried a specific meaning, weaving a tapestry of belief and tradition. At the center of these gatherings, or perhaps in more intimate settings, another powerful ritual took place: the smoking of sacred pipes. The Adena are famous for their tubular pipes, masterfully carved from stone, often in the shape of human figures. These weren't for casual smoking. Archaeologists believe these pipes were sacred instruments, a direct line of communication with the spirit world. Think about the act itself. The pipe would be filled with native tobacco or other sacred plants. As the smoke was drawn in and then released, it wasn't just disappearing into the air. It was seen as carrying prayers, intentions, and messages upwards, a visible breath connecting the earthly realm to the cosmos. The figures carved on the pipes are fascinating. They often show individuals in ceremonial regalia, with elaborate hairstyles and ornaments. Are these portraits of ancestors, shamans, or mythical beings? When a person held one of these pipes, they were holding a figure of power, a conduit to something much larger than themselves. Look closely at the craftsmanship. The stone is smooth, polished by countless hands over generations. The figures are detailed, capturing a sense of personality and presence. Some pipes even depict individuals with a condition known as goiter, a swelling of the neck. This incredible detail shows us that the Adena were keen observers of their world and the people in it, immortalizing them in stone. These ceremonies weren't isolated events. They were the threads that wove the fabric of Adena society together. Gatherings at the mound centers would have been opportunities for distant clans to come together, to trade goods, to arrange marriages, and to reinforce their shared identity. Building and maintaining these enormous earthworks required a huge degree of cooperation and social organization. It was a community project on a grand scale, a physical manifestation of their collective spirit. Imagine the scene at a great mound, like the famous Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia. This wasn't just a burial place for one important person. It was a layered history book of earth and bone. Burials were complex affairs. The deceased were often placed in log-lined tombs, accompanied by precious grave goods, finely crafted flint blades, copper bracelets, and mica cutouts, shaped like animals or human hands. These weren't just possessions. They were offerings, tools and symbols for the journey into the afterlife. And over time, new layers of earth were added. New burials were included, and the mound grew, becoming a tangible link between the living and the generations of ancestors who rested within. Each layer of earth was a communal act of remembrance, a renewal of the covenant between the people and their past. When we stand before these mounds today, it's easy to see them as just hills. But if we listen closely, if we let our imaginations fill the silence, we can almost hear the echoes of those ancient chants. We can almost see the firelight dancing on carved stone faces and feel the reverence of a people deeply connected to their land, their ancestors, and the cosmos. The world of the Adena may have vanished, but its spirit endures in the earth itself, a silent testament to a rich and profound ceremonial life. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past. If you've found this glimpse into the Adena world as fascinating as I do, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more explorations of ancient cultures. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next video. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt a profound connection to something larger than yourself? Imagine that same feeling, but 1,000 years ago, without city lights, without telescopes, just the raw, brilliant tapestry of the cosmos. For the Adena people, who thrived in the Ohio River Valley over 2,000 years ago, the sky wasn't just a beautiful sight. It was a guide, a clock, and a sacred map that profoundly shaped their world. Today, we journey back in time to explore the fascinating intersection of astronomy and the sacred landscape of the Adena. We'll uncover how these ancient people read the heavens and inscribed that celestial knowledge onto the very earth they walked upon. The Adena are renowned for their impressive earthworks, massive conical mounds, and large circular enclosures that still dot the landscape of modern-day Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. For a long time, these were primarily understood as burial sites, monuments to honor their ancestors. While that's certainly a crucial part of their purpose, a new generation of archaeologists and archaeoastronomers began asking a different question. What if these structures were doing more? What if they were also giant astronomical observatories? Let's start with the most fundamental celestial cycles, the rising and setting of the sun. Think about the solsticista, longest day of the year in summer and the shortest in winter. These moments marked critical turning points in the year, signaling changes in seasons, dictating times for planting and harvesting, and holding deep spiritual significance. Researchers began meticulously surveying Adena sites, using modern technology to map their orientations, and what they found was astonishing. Many of the circular earthworks, like the famous Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia or the Miamisburg Mound in Ohio, appear to have gateways or alignments that point directly to the sunrise on the winter or summer solstice. Imagine standing within one of these great circles on the shortest day of the year. As dawn breaks, the first rays of the sun stream perfectly through a designated opening in the earthen wall, illuminating the center of the sacred space. It wouldn't have been an accident. This was celestial theater, a powerful, annual confirmation that the cycle of life, death, and rebirth was continuing as it should. The sun was returning, and with it, the promise of longer days and renewed life. This connection wasn't just about marking a date on a calendar. For the Adena, the earth and the sky were not separate realms. The placement of these mounds, aligned with cosmic events, was a way of weaving the heavens into the fabric of their terrestrial world. Their sacred spaces were a microcosm of the cosmos itself, places where the earthly and the divine could meet. Building these structures was a communal act of creating harmony, of physically grounding their spiritual beliefs. But the sun wasn't the only celestial player on the Adena stage. The moon, with its own intricate cycle of phases and its 18.6-year lunar standstill cycle, also appears to have been a major focus. The lunar standstill is a period when the moon reaches its most extreme northern and southern rising and setting points on the horizon. It's a much more complex cycle to track than the sun's, requiring generations of careful observation. Some of the most complex Adena earthworks, particularly the large, sacred circles known as henges, seem to incorporate these lunar alignments. For example, the Newark earthworks in Ohio, though primarily associated with the later Hopewell culture which succeeded the Adena, were built upon principles that likely had Adena origins. These sites feature incredibly precise alignments to these major and minor lunar standstills. Why track the moon with such dedication? The moon was often associated with the feminine, with cycles of fertility, and with the rhythm of life itself. By aligning their sacred architecture with the moon's extremes, the Adena were likely not just observing but participating in these cosmic rhythms. It was a way to ensure balance and to tap into the powerful forces that governed the world around them. The placement of the mounds themselves tells a story. They weren't scattered randomly across the landscape. They were often placed on prominent hilltops or river terraces, locations that offered a clear, unobstructed view of the horizon. From these vantage points, an Adena skywatcher could precisely track the movement of the sun, moon, and perhaps even certain prominent stars or constellations. Consider the Wright earthworks in Ohio. This site features a large, nearly perfect square enclosure connected to a circle. The geometry is remarkable, and studies suggest that its diagonals align with solstice, sunrises, and sunsets. The entire complex acts as a celestial calendar written on the land. It wasn't just a place, it was a device, a tool for understanding and engaging with the cosmos. This understanding of the sky would have been deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs. The sky world was likely home to powerful spirits and deities. The sun might have been seen as a life-giving father figure, the moon a nurturing mother. The stars could have been the ancestors themselves, watching over their descendants by aligning their most sacred acts, a burial of their revered dead with. These celestial events, the Adena were creating a powerful symbolic connection. A burial mound aligned with the winter solstice sunrise might signify a belief in rebirth, with the soul of the departed journeying with the sun on its path back to strength and light. The mounds became portals, connecting the world of the living, the world of the dead, and the world of the spirits above. It was a quiet, profound harmony between heaven and earth. The knowledge required to build these structures is truly staggering. It implies a sophisticated understanding of geometry, long-term astronomical observation passed down through generations, and a highly organized society capable of mobilizing large numbers of people for these massive construction projects. This wasn't primitive superstition. This was science, spirituality, and art all rolled into one. The Adena were architects of the sacred, using soil and stone to write their cosmology onto the landscape. Today, as we stand in the quiet presence of these ancient mounds, we are standing in the remnants of this incredible worldview. They are more than just hills of dirt. They are the silent testament to a people who saw the universe as a connected, meaningful whole. They looked to the sky not just with wonder, but with understanding. And they used that understanding to build a world that reflected the sacred order they saw in the cosmos. They remind us that for millennia, humanity has sought to find its place in the universe, to understand the great cycles that govern our existence. The Adena did it with a quiet elegance, creating a sacred landscape where the earth below and the heavens above were joined in perfect, harmonious rhythm. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the celestial world of the Adena. It is a powerful reminder that there are still so many secrets waiting to be uncovered in the ancient landscapes around us. If you enjoyed this exploration, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the past. See you next time. Welcome, bike history lovers. Today, we're stepping back thousands of years to explore the remarkable world of Adena artisans. Imagine a landscape dotted with monumental earthworks, a society thriving in the Ohio River Valley. But their legacy isn't just in the earth they moved. It's in the intricate, beautiful objects they held in their hands. When we think of ancient tools, we often picture rough, purely functional items. But the Adena people elevated craftsmanship to an art form. Their tools weren't just for getting a job done. They were expressions of a deep connection to the world around them. Take their bone tools, for instance. We're not talking about crude implements. Archaeologists have unearthed awls, needles, and scrapers that are astonishingly delicate, polished to a smooth finish, and sometimes carved with subtle, elegant designs. Imagine the patience and skill it took to transform a simple animal bone into a tool so fine it could be used for detailed leatherwork or intricate weaving. Each groove and polished surface tells a story of respect for the animal that provided the bone and a desire for beauty in everyday life. This appreciation for natural materials extended to every facet of their craft. The Adena were masters of working with stone. creating pipes that are considered masterpieces of prehistoric art. These weren't just for smoking. Many were carved into stunning effigies of animals, like wolves, birds, and even humans. The famous Adena pipe, discovered in a mound in Ohio, depicts a human figure with such detailed spools, a specific hairstyle, and ritual clothing that it gives us a rare, personal glimpse into their world. Carving these from hard stone like Ohio pipestone with only other stone or bone tools required incredible vision and dedication. These pipes were likely central to ceremonies, their smoke carrying prayers and stories into the spirit world. Each puff was a connection to their ancestors and their cosmology. Then there were the ornaments that adorned their bodies. The Adena people created beautiful pendants and gorgets, which are decorative plaques worn on the chest. They used materials that were often sourced from far away, showing their extensive trade networks. Lustrous copper, hammered into intricate shapes, was brought down from the Great Lakes region. Marine shells, like large conch shells from the Gulf of Mexico, were painstakingly cut, ground, and polished into crescent-shaped gorgets or delicate beads. Think about the journey of that shell, passed from hand to hand over hundreds of miles, finally arriving in an Adena village to be transformed. When someone wore a shell pendant, they weren't just wearing a pretty object, they were wearing a piece of the wider world, a symbol of connection, trade, and the sacred power of the distant ocean. The designs etched onto these items whirls, concentric circles, and stylized animal forms weren't random doodles. They were likely potent symbols representing natural cycles, celestial events, or clan identities. We often overlook one of the most common but perishable crafts: textiles. While few examples survive the centuries, impressions left in clay tell us that the Adena were skilled weavers. They wove fabrics from plant fibers like milkweed and dogbane, creating everything from bags and mats to clothing. The patterns preserved in these clay impressions show sophisticated techniques, including twining and plaiting. Imagine the vibrant colors they might have achieved using natural dyes from berries, roots, and minerals. These textiles would have provided warmth and comfort, but like everything else, they were imbued with meaning. The patterns woven into a cloak or a pouch could have signified a person's status, told a story, or offered spiritual protection. The act of weaving itself, interlacing individual threads to create a strong, unified whole, is a powerful metaphor for community and the interconnectedness of life. Let's also talk about their pottery. Adena ceramics were typically thick-walled and utilitarian, designed for cooking and storage. Bate benare, we see a touch of artistry. Many pots were decorated with simple cord marking or fabric impressions, created by pressing a cord-wrapped paddle or a piece of woven textile against the wet clay. While this texturing made the pots easier to grip, the choice of pattern added a subtle aesthetic element to an everyday object. It shows that, for the Adena, function and form were not separate. A well-made pot was not only durable but also pleasing to the eye and hand. It was an object created with care, intended to serve the family and the community for a long time. So, why did they pour so much effort into making these objects beautiful? Because, for the Adena, there was no sharp division between the physical and the spiritual, the mundane and the sacred. The natural world was alive with power and meaning. A stone wasn't just a rock. It had a spirit. A tree wasn't just wood. It was a living being. By crafting these materials with such care and intention, they were honoring the life force within them. A finely carved bone wasn't just better to use. It honored the spirit of the deer it came from. A pendant, carved from a Gulf Coast shell, connected the wearer to the sacred power of the ocean. These objects were conduits of meaning, reinforcing their worldview with every use. When we look at Adena crafts, we are looking at more than just artifacts. We are looking at a philosophy of life, carved in stone, woven in fiber, and shaped in clay. Each handmade item was a testament to their deep respect for materials, their patience, their incredible skill, and their understanding of the cyclical nature of life, death, and renewal. These artisans didn't just make things, they breathed life and meaning into the materials of their world. leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire awe and wonder today. They show us that art isn't a luxury. It's a fundamental human way of connecting with the world and with each other. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the Adena world of craftsmanship. It's truly amazing what we can learn from the things people leave behind. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through ancient America. In this chapter, we step into the heart of the Adena world, exploring the very fabric of their society, community, and kinship. How did these early people organize themselves long before the rise of kings and empires? Let's find out. Imagine a landscape dotted with small, close-knit communities, nestled in the fertile valleys of the Ohio River. Life here was ungoverned by grand political structures or powerful rulers in the way we might think of them today. Instead, the Adena world was woven together by something far more intimate: the powerful threads of family, shared beliefs, and a deep, abiding respect for the natural world. These weren't isolated groups. Picture them as a network of extended families, or clans, connected through generations of shared ancestry and mutual support. Marriage and trade would have created bonds that stretched across the landscape, linking one village to the next. When you met someone from a neighboring settlement, you weren't meeting a stranger, but a distant cousin, an in-law, or a trading partner your family had known for years. This intricate web of relationships was the foundation of their society, ensuring cooperation and a sense of collective identity. At the center of this social world were shared rituals. The great ceremonial mounds we've discussed weren't just tombs. They were communal projects, sacred spaces that brought people together from miles around. Imagine families gathering for seasonal festivals, astronomical events, or important rites of passage. These gatherings were vital. They were opportunities to reinforce social bonds, exchange goods and ideas, and participate in ceremonies that affirmed their shared cosmology and place in the universe. The act of building a mound, itself moving earth basket by basket, was a profound act of community, a physical manifestation of their unity and shared purpose. So, who led these communities? It seems Adena leadership was not based on political power or inherited wealth, but on spiritual authority and wisdom. Leaders were likely shamans or clan elders, individuals who were seen as having a special connection to the spirit world. Their influence came from their ability to mediate between the physical and the supernatural, to heal the sick, to predict the changing of the seasons, and to guide the community through important rituals. They led not by command, but by respect and consensus. Their authority was earned through wisdom, spiritual insight, and their dedication to the well-being of the group. This form of leadership reflects a society deeply in tune with its environment. The Adena didn't seek to dominate nature. They saw themselves as part of it. Their worldview was one of balance and reciprocity. You took from the earth, but you also gave back through offerings and ceremony. This philosophy permeated their social structure. Just as they lived in harmony with the forests and rivers, they sought harmony within their own communities. Conflict resolution would have likely focused on restoring balance and maintaining group cohesion rather than on punishment. Their art gives us a beautiful window into this mindset. The intricate carvings on their stone tablets and pipes often depict animals like birds, wolves, and bears, not as mere creatures, but as powerful spiritual beings. Sometimes we see figures that are part human, part animal, suggesting a belief in transformation and the fluid boundary between the human and natural worlds. This wasn't just decoration. It was a visual language expressing their deepest beliefs about the cosmos and their place within it. These weren't just people living asterisk on asterisk, the land. They were a people living asterisk with asterisk the land, in a constant, respectful dialogue. The homes of the Adena also tell a story of community. They lived in circular houses, often built in small clusters. This circular design is significant. Unlike a square, a circle has no corners, no head of the table. It promotes a sense of equality and inclusion, where everyone is visible and part of the whole. Imagine families gathered around a central hearth, sharing food, stories, and the tasks of daily life. This architecture didn't just provide shelter, it reinforced the communal values that were at the core of their society. This social structure, based on kinship and spiritual authority, was incredibly resilient. It allowed the Adena culture to thrive for nearly 1,000 years. It fostered a stable, peaceful existence, enabling them to develop complex ceremonial traditions and a sophisticated understanding of their world without the need for standing armies or fortified cities. Their strength lay not in military might, but in the power of their social connections and their shared spiritual path. So, as we look back at the Adena, we see a society organized not by force, but by familia. A community united not by laws, but by rituals. A people led not by kings, but by keepers of wisdom. They show us a different way of being, a model of society built on cooperation, spiritual connection, and a profound sense of kinship with both each other and the world around them. It is a powerful reminder that the foundations of a strong community are often found in the simple, timeless bonds that connect us all. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of Adena community and kinship. If you found this journey as fascinating as I did, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring. Welcome, bike history explorers. Today, we're embarking on a journey not through dusty books, but across the rolling landscapes of the Ohio Valley. We're chasing echoes of a civilization that flourished here thousands of years ago. The Adena people. While much of their world has vanished, they left behind monumental testaments to their existence. Great earthen mounds that still command the horizon. Join me as we explore these sacred spaces and listen to the soft hum of time that lingers over them. Our first stop is a place that truly puts things into perspective. Here we are, in Miamisburg, Ohio, standing before a giant. This is the Miamisburg Mound, one of the two largest conical burial mounds in eastern North America. Just look at its scale. It stands nearly 70 feet high and has a circumference of over 800 feet. It's estimated to contain 54,000 cubic yards of earth, all moved by human hands, basketful by basketful, over 2,000 years ago. Imagine the community effort, the shared purpose, the generations of people who contributed to this colossal structure. It wasn't built in a day or even a year. It was a project that spanned lifetimes. As we walk the path that spirals to its summit, take a moment. Feel the gentle slope beneath your feet. The mound is almost perfectly conical, a testament to the sophisticated understanding of geometry and engineering that Adena possessed. From up here, the modern world stretches out, below houses, roads, the city itself. But for a moment, try to erase all that. Picture instead a landscape of dense forests, winding rivers, and small villages. From this vantage point, the Adena could survey their world, connect with the sky, and honor their most revered dead. The individuals buried within were likely leaders, shamans, or people of great importance, laid to rest with ceremonial objects that tell us fragments of their story. Now, let's travel about 200 miles southeast to Moundsville, West Virginia, to witness another marvel of the Adena culture. This is the Grave Creek Mound. At 62 feet high and 240 feet in diameter, it is another giant of the ancient world. Its story is intertwined with the story of American archaeology itself. In 1838, the mound was tunneled into by amateurs, a destructive but common practice at the time. What they found inside were two burial vaults, one above the other, containing the remains of several individuals along with copper rings, mica ornaments, and shell beads. These were not just graves. They were elaborate tombs, meant to protect and honor the deceased for eternity. One of the most fascinating and controversial artifacts found here was the Grave Creek Stone, a small sandstone tablet inscribed with characters that some believed were an ancient alphabet. While most scholars today consider it a hoax, it speaks to the sense of mystery and wonder these mounds have always inspired. Standing there, you can feel it. The air seems different. There's a quiet reverence that hangs over this place. It's a palpable connection to a past that is both incredibly distant and profoundly human. The hands that built this were just like ours. They felt joy, sorrow, and a need to remember. So, what was the purpose of these immense structures? For the Adena, they were central to their cosmology. They were sacred places, burial sites, and territorial markers all in one. Building a mound was a ritual act, a way of transforming the landscape and embedding their cultural memory into the very earth. The conical shape is significant. It reaches towards the sky, perhaps connecting the earthly realm with the celestial one. The sheer effort involved in their construction suggests a highly organized society, with a shared belief system and strong leadership. These mounds weren't just piles of dirt, they were the heart of the community. As we walk around the base of Grave Creek Mound, notice how the grass softens the edges of this ancient monument. Time has been both a friend and an foe, while many mounds have been lost to farming and development. Places like Grave Creek and Miamisburg have been preserved, allowing us to stand in awe of what came before. They are outdoor classrooms, silent storytellers. They challenge us to think about our own relationship with the land and what we will leave behind for future generations. The Adena left these echoes in the valley, whispers of a complex and vibrant culture. These mounds are more than just archaeological sites. They are cemeteries. The people buried within were loved, mourned, and honored. When we beseech, it's essential to do so with respect. We are guests in their final resting place. By walking these grounds, we are participating in a long tradition of remembrance. We are acknowledging the deep history of this land, a history that began long before European settlers arrived. It's a history written not in books, but in earth and stone, a history that invites us to listen closely to the echoes in the Ohio Valley. What strikes me most is the quiet dignity of these places. In our noisy, fast-paced world, the mounds offer a space for calm reflection. They are anchors to a deep past, reminding us that we are part of a much longer human story. The soft hum of time here isn't just an idea, it's a feeling. It's the rustle of leaves on trees that are descendants of the ancient forests. It's the way the light falls on the curved earth. It is the humbling realization that you are standing on ground hallowed by generations of human effort and belief. As we conclude our journey, I hope you feel that connection, too. The Adena Mounds of the Ohio Valley are a precious heritage. They are a reminder of the ingenuity, spirituality, and resilience of the first peoples of this continent. They ask us to slow down, to look closer, and to listen to the stories the land has to tell. They are echoes of the past, resonating powerfully in the present. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible trip back in time. Exploring these monumental sites is a truly humbling experience. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a like, and do not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do not miss our next adventure. Let me know in the comments if you've ever visited an ancient mound and what it felt like. Until next time, keep exploring. Welcome back to our journey through the ancient heartland of North America. Last time, we explored the fascinating world of the Adena people, their conical mounds, and their unique burial practices. But history is never static. Around 200 BCE, a remarkable transformation began to unfold across the Ohio Valley and beyond. This wasn't a sudden conquest or a mysterious disappearance. It was an evolution, a blending of traditions that gave rise to one of the most influential cultures of ancient North America, the Hopewell. So, how did this happen? Think of it less like a new chapter being written and more like the old one being revised and expanded upon. The foundational elements of Adena society didn't just vanish. They became the building blocks for something grander. The Adena had already established the importance of ceremonial mounds and a reverence for their ancestors. The Hopewell took these concepts and amplified them, turning them into a phenomenon that would span a vast portion of the continent. Let's start with the most visible legacy, the mounds. The Adena were known for their distinct conical burial mounds. As Hopewell traditions emerged, the architecture became more complex and ambitious. The classic cone shape was still used, but it was now joined by massive geometric earthworks. We're talking about perfect circles, squares, and octagons, often interconnected and stretching for miles. The Newark earthworks in Ohio, for example, is a breathtaking testament to this new scale of construction. It's so vast and precise that it's been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. These weren't just burial sites anymore. They were sprawling ceremonial centers, places for gathering, ritual, and community. On a scale the Adena had never attempted. The labor and coordination required to build these monumental structures suggest a more organized and, perhaps, more hierarchical society, one capable of mobilizing large numbers of people for a common purpose. This explosion in architectural complexity was mirrored by an increase in ceremonial rituals. Adena burials, while significant, were often focused on a single important individual. Hopewell burial practices, by contrast, became more elaborate and inclusive, often featuring multiple individuals within a single mound, accompanied by an astonishing array of grave goods. This brings us to another key aspect of the transition: the expansion of trade. The Adena had a modest trade network, primarily sourcing materials from the Great Lakes region and the Appalachian Mountains. The Hopewell blew this network wide open. Archaeologists have found materials in Hopewell sites that came from all corners of the known world. We're talking about obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, seashells from the Gulf of Mexico, copper from the Great Lakes, and mica from the Carolinas. This wasn't just casual bartering. It was a sophisticated, continent-spanning exchange system, often called the Hopewell interaction sphere. Imagine a trader's canoe paddling down the Ohio River, laden with shimmering sheets of mica. This mica wasn't just a shiny rock. It was a sacred material, painstakingly carved into intricate shapes like human hands, animal claws, or geometric patterns. These objects weren't for everyday use. They were ceremonial items, symbols of status, power, and spiritual connection. The sheer variety and distance these materials traveled tell us that the Hopewell world was incredibly well connected. This network wasn't just for goods. It was a conduit for ideas, beliefs, and artistic styles. A particular pottery design from Illinois might influence a craftsman in Ohio, or a ceremonial practice from Tennessee might be adopted in Michigan. This shared cultural toolkit is what defines the Hopewell phenomenon. The artistry itself reached new heights. While the Adena created beautiful artifacts, like tubular pipes and engraved tablets, Hopewell artisans took this craftsmanship to another level. They created stunningly realistic animal effigy pipes, intricate copper breastplates, and delicately crafted ornaments from pearl and shell. The level of detail and realism in their art gives us a profound glimpse into their worldview. They saw a world teeming with spiritual power, where animals like bears, birds of prey, and water serpents held deep symbolic meaning. These weren't just decorations. They were tools for ritual, objects that connected the physical and spiritual realms. So, what drove this transition? Why did Adena traditions evolve into the Hopewell expression? There likely wasn't a single reason, but a combination of factors. Perhaps population growth led to a need for more complex social structures to manage resources and labor. The success of Adena agricultural practices, based on native plants like squash and sunflower, may have created a stable food supply, allowing more time and energy to be devoted to ceremonial activities and artistic production. The expanding trade network itself may have been a catalyst. As different groups interacted more frequently, they shared innovations and ideas, creating a positive feedback loop of cultural development. A new ritual practice in one area could be so compelling that it was quickly adopted and adapted by neighboring groups, spreading rapidly through the interaction sphere. This doesn't mean everyone became Hopewell in the same way. Local traditions remained strong, but they were now part of a larger, interconnected cultural conversation. It's crucial to understand that the Hopewell were not a single tribe or a unified empire. They were a diverse collection of distinct peoples who shared a common set of religious beliefs, ceremonial practices, and artistic traditions. The Adena provided the cultural grammar, and the Hopewell used it to write an epic poem. The core ideas: mound building, elaborate burials, and a reverence for ancestors were all inherited from their Adena predecessors. In essence, the story of the transition from Adena to Hopewell is a story of scaling up. The mounds got bigger and more complex. The trade routes stretched further. The ceremonies became more elaborate, and the art more refined. The Adena laid a powerful foundation, and for several centuries, the Hopewell peoples built upon it, creating a cultural golden age whose influence would echo through the ages. The great earthworks they left behind are not just piles of dirt. They're the enduring symbols of a vibrant, interconnected world, a testament to the ingenuity and spiritual depth of North America's ancient peoples. The legacy of the Adena was not to fade away, but to become the seed from which the magnificent Hopewell culture grew. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of the past. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into ancient history. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this incredible cultural event? See you next time. Hello and welcome back. We've journeyed through the rise of the Adena, marveling at their monumental earthworks and their intricate culture that flourished for 1,000 years. But now, we arrive at the most profound question of all. What happened to them? Why did this vibrant civilization, the builders of the great mounds, seem to vanish from the Ohio Valley? This is the mystery of the vanishing builders. Around 100 AD, the classic Adena way of life began to change. The construction of their iconic conical burial mounds slowed and eventually stopped. The distinct pottery styles, the shamanistic art, the elaborate burial rituals, they all started to fade, replaced by new traditions and new ideas. It wasn't a sudden cataclysm, like a volcanic eruption or a devastating war that wiped them out in a day. It was a gradual transformation, a slow dissolving of a culture that had defined the landscape for centuries. So, what could have caused such a profound shift? Archaeologists have debated this for decades, and there's no single, simple answer. It's more like a puzzle with several interlocking pieces. One of the most compelling theories points to the emergence of a new, powerful culture: the Hopewell. The Hopewell weren't invaders in the traditional sense. They were neighbors, likely descendants of the Adena, or related groups, who developed a more complex and far-reaching society. Think of it less as a conquest and more as a cultural takeover. The Hopewell tradition brought with it new ideas, new religious practices, and, most importantly, a vast trade network that stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes. Imagine you're an Adena person living around that time. Suddenly, you're seeing incredible new materials arriving in your village: gleaming copper from Michigan, shimmering mica from the Carolinas, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, and seashells from the Florida coast. These weren't just pretty objects. They were symbols of power, prestige, and a connection to a much wider world. The old ways, centered on local traditions and ancestors, might have started to seem a little small in comparison. The Hopewell built even larger and more complex earthworks, not just simple mounds, but massive geometric enclosures, ceremonial complexes that could host hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Their art and rituals were different, too. While the Adena focused on the shaman and the spiritual journey of the individual, the Hopewell seemed more concerned with community-wide ceremonies and displaying the status of their leaders. It's possible that the Adena people were simply absorbed into this new, dynamic culture. They didn't vanish. They evolved. They became Hopewell. Their DNA, their knowledge, and their heritage were woven into the fabric of this new society. But there are other possibilities to consider. Climate change is always a powerful agent of cultural transformation. We know from paleoclimatic data that there were significant shifts in weather patterns during that period. A series of prolonged droughts or unusually cold winters could have severely impacted their agriculture. The Adena were early farmers, cultivating crops like squash, sunflower, and other native plants. If those crops failed year after year, it would have put immense strain on their society. Food shortages lead to social instability. People might have been forced to abandon their settled villages and ceremonial centers in search of more reliable food sources. This would have fractured their social structure, making it difficult to organize the large labor forces needed to build and maintain the mounds. In this scenario, the Adena way of life didn't get replaced. It simply fell apart under environmental pressure. The people would have scattered into smaller, more mobile groups, adapting to a tougher world. Their grand cultural project, the building of the mounds, became an unaffordable luxury. Another angle to explore is the possibility of internal social conflict or disease. We often imagine these ancient societies as peaceful and harmonious, but human nature hasn't changed. Competition for resources, power struggles between chiefs or clans, or the rise of a new religious ideology could have torn the Adena world apart from the inside. A new spiritual movement might have rejected the old burial traditions, declaring the ancestral mounds to be obsolete. And disease, as we've seen so many times in history, can be a devastating force. The introduction of a new pathogen, for which the population had no immunity, could have swept through their villages, causing a demographic collapse. A society that loses a significant portion of its people, especially its elders who hold the knowledge and traditions, can struggle to recover. Its cultural memory becomes fragmented, and its ability to continue large-scale projects is crippled. So, what was lost in this transition? We lost the direct thread of their story. We lost the specific meanings behind their symbols, the words to their songs, the names of their great leaders. When you stand before the Grave Creek Mound or the Miamisburg Mound, you're looking at a masterpiece created by anonymous hands. We can analyze the artifacts and map the earthworks, but we can't hear their voices. The specific nuances of their spiritual beliefs, why a shaman was buried with a particular pipe, or what a ceremony at a sacred circle truly felt like, are largely gone, preserved only as silent stone, shell, and earth. It's a library where most of the books have been lost, but not everything vanished. What survived is perhaps even more fascinating. The legacy of the Adena didn't just disappear. It flowed into the cultures that followed. The mound-building tradition itself, while changed, was continued by the Hopewell, and later, the Mississippian cultures. The idea of sacred landscapes, of shaping the earth to align with the cosmos and the spirit world, became a foundational element of many Eastern Woodlands societies. More importantly, pieces of their worldview, their stories, and their beliefs likely survived in the oral traditions of later Native American peoples. When European explorers and settlers first encountered tribes like the Shawnee, the Miami, the Lenape, and others, they heard creation stories, hero myths, and clan histories that had been passed down for generations. Many of these oral traditions speak of ancestors who came from the earth, of great horned serpents, of powerful thunderbirds, and of a multi-layered universe. It's impossible to draw a straight line and say, this specific Shawnee story comes directly from the Adena. But the echoes are there, the themes of transformation, the reverence for ancestors, the connection to the spirit world. These core concepts resonate with what we see in the Adena archaeological record. The stories of later peoples may hold the fragmented memories of the mound builders. They are the living continuation of a spiritual heritage that is thousands of years old. The Adena didn't write their history down in books, but they wrote it upon the land and whispered it into the stories that would be told around fires for 1,000 years to come. They didn't vanish. They became ancestors, their legacy absorbed and carried forward by their descendants. The mystery, then, is not about a disappearance, but about a transformation. It's about tracing the faint, beautiful echoes of the Adena culture through the long corridors of time. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey into the world of the Adena. It's a story of human ingenuity, spirituality, and enduring mystery. If you've enjoyed this series, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into our shared past. Your support makes all of this possible. See you next time. Imagine stumbling upon a massive, ancient earthwork, a silent giant slumbering beneath layers of soil and time. This was a reality for early American settlers and farmers in the Ohio Valley. They were the first in modern times to rediscover the mysterious mounds left behind by the Adena people, long before the word archaeology even existed. At first, these were just curiosities, local landmarks, some called Indian forts. Few understood they were stepping on the remnants of a sophisticated culture that thrived over 2,000 years ago. The journey from curious folklore to scientific understanding is a story of discovery, mistakes, and incredible technological leaps. As the 19th century dawned, a more systematic curiosity began to take hold. Figures like Caleb Atwater and later Ephraim Squire and Edwin Davis were among the first to map and document these monumental structures. Their work, Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, published in 1848, was a landmark achievement for the fledgling Smithsonian Institution. It was the first time anyone had tried to comprehensively catalog these sites, but their methods were, by today's standards, shockingly crude. They were, essentially, treasure hunters, albeit with a scientific curiosity. They dug massive trenches straight through the mounds, often with shovels and teams of laborers, searching for artifacts. They were looking for beautifully crafted pipes, copper ornaments, and burial goods, and in that, they were successful. But their focus on objects meant they often destroyed invaluable information in the process. They didn't understand the importance of stratigraphy, the layers of soil that tell a story of time. They didn't meticulously record the exact location of every find. It was a bit like reading a book by ripping out all the prettiest pictures and throwing the rest of the pages away. We learned a lot, but we also lost a lot. One of the biggest blunders of this early era was the mound builder myth. Unable to reconcile the sophisticated earthworks with their prejudiced views of contemporary Native Americans, many early antiquarians concluded that a lost race, perhaps Vikings, Egyptians, or the lost tribes of Israel, must have built the mounds and then vanished. This harmful and racist theory persisted for decades, driving a wedge between the incredible achievements of the past and the living descendants of these ancient cultures. It took rigorous scientific work by archaeologists like Cyrus Thomas in the late 19th century to definitively prove that the ancestors of modern Native Americans were, in fact, the brilliant architects of the mounds. This was a crucial turning point, shifting the focus from fantastical theories to the actual people who lived and died here. As we moved into the 20th century, archaeology started to become a true science. The treasure hunting approach gave way to more meticulous methods. Archaeologists like William C. Mills and H.C. Sheathrone of the Ohio Historical Society began excavating with greater care. They started digging in controlled squares, carefully documenting the layers of soil and the precise location of every single artifact, post hole, and fire pit. They understood that the context of an object is just as important as the object itself. Imagine finding a single pottery by itself. It's just a broken piece of clay. But if you know it was found in a fire pit alongside deer bones and charred seeds, it suddenly tells a story about what the Adena were cooking for dinner. This new, methodical approach was revolutionary. It allowed archaeologists to reconstruct the layout of entire villages, understand burial practices, and piece together the daily lives of the Adena people in ways that were previously impossible. The real game changer, however, came in the mid-20th century with the invention of radiocarbon dating. Before this, dating an archaeological site was mostly guesswork, based on comparing artifact styles. But Willard Libby's discovery allowed scientists to measure the decay of carbon-14 in organic materials, things like charcoal from a hearth, a wooden post, or even a human bone. Suddenly, we could put a real, scientific date on these sites. We could finally say with confidence that the Adena culture flourished from roughly 800 BC to a D1. This was like turning on a light in a dark room. It established a firm timeline, allowing researchers to track the culture's development, its expansion, and its eventual transition into the later Hopewell tradition. The Great Serpent Mound, for example, long thought to be Adena, was dated using this method and found to be from a later period, completely rewriting a chapter of Ohio's ancient history. Today, the science has advanced 2 levels that 19th century excavators couldn't even dream of. We now use tools like ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry to see beneath the earth without ever digging a hole. These geophysical surveys can reveal the outlines of buried structures, pits, and earthworks, allowing archaeologists to excavate with surgical precision, targeting specific areas of interest while leaving the rest of the site undisturbed. This is crucial for preservation, as every excavation is, vihits natura, a destructive act. Modern soil analysis is another incredible frontier. By studying microscopic plant remains called phytoliths, and ancient pollen grains preserved in the soil, we can reconstruct the ancient environment. We can tell what kinds of trees were growing, what crops the Adena were cultivating, like squash, sunflower, and magrasand, how they were managing their landscape. Chemical analysis of soil can even detect the residue of ancient human activity, revealing the ghost of a long-gone structure. Furthermore, we're now re-examining artifacts and skeletal remains that were excavated a century ago, but this time with powerful new tools. Isotope analysis on human bones, for instance, can tell us about an individual's diet and even where they grew up by analyzing the chemical signatures of the food and water they consumed. Did they primarily eat food from the river or from the forest? Did they move to this village from 100 miles away? These are questions we can now begin to answer. DNA analysis, though challenging with ancient samples, holds the promise of unlocking secrets about kinship, population movements, and the genetic relationships between the Adena and other ancient and modern peoples. Each new technology allows us to ask more detailed questions and extract more information from the same silent mounds and artifacts. From the destructive curiosity of the 19th century to the high-tech science of the 21st, the study of the Adena has mirrored the evolved ocean of archaeology itself. The early mistakes, born of ignorance and prejudice, served as important lessons. They taught us the critical importance of context, respect for the cultures we study, and the necessity of preserving these irreplaceable sites. Modern science is not just revealing new facts, it's allowing the Adena people to speak to us more clearly than ever before. Through the carbon in their fires, the pollen in their fields, and the very chemistry of their bones, the rediscovery is ongoing, and the story is far from over. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the ancient world. Let us know in the comments what ancient mystery you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next video. As we stand at the threshold of our final chapter, let's take a moment to breathe, to feel the ground beneath our feet, solid and ancient. We've journeyed through time, tracing the footsteps of the Adena people, exploring their world of earth and sky. But what is the ultimate lesson from these silent, patient mounds? What enduring wisdom do they offer us, centuries later? Join me as we contemplate the legacy of the Adena. A legacy that is not just buried in the past, but is very much alive. Speaking to the core of what it means to be human, this is not just an end to a story, but a beginning of understanding. The mounds are more than just earth. They are monuments to community. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer effort, not one person, not a handful, but hundreds of individuals working together, basket by basket, over generations. There were no machines, no beasts of burden, just human hands and a shared purpose. Each basket of soil was an act of participation, a contribution to a collective vision. This tells us that the Adena understood a fundamental truth. Great things are not achieved alone. They are born from cooperation, from a sense of belonging to something larger than oneself. In our modern world, so often focused on individual achievement, the mounds remind us of the profound power and beauty of community. They challenge us to ask, what are we building together today? What legacy of cooperation will we leave for the future? Beyond community, the mounds speak of a deep and abiding reverence for the earth. The Adena didn't import stone from distant quarries or forge metal for their monuments. They used the very soil they lived on. The earth was their canvas, their medium, their sacred text. They shaped the land not as conquerors, but as partners. This intimate relationship with their environment is a powerful lesson in sustainability and respect. They understood that the earth provided everything: food, shelter, medicine, and even the material for their most sacred constructions. They saw themselves not as separate from nature, but as an integral part of its intricate web. As we face our own environmental challenges, the Adena's approach offers a path forward, one of harmony, stewardship, and a profound appreciation for the planet that sustains us all. They teach us to see the sacred in the soil, the divine in the landscape that cradles us. Perhaps the most poignant lesson from the mounds is the importance of honoring those who came before us. These earthworks are, at their heart, places of memory. They are elaborate tombs, yes, but they are also bridges connecting the living to the dead, the present to the past. The meticulous rituals, the precious grave goods, the very act of building a mountain for an ancestorate, all points to a culture that held its lineage in the highest esteem. They believed that the ancestors were not gone, but simply transformed, their spirits remaining a guiding presence. This deep respect for ancestry fostered a sense of continuity, a belief that their culture was a long, unbroken chain. It gave their lives meaning and context, in a world that often seems to be moving at a frantic pace, obsessed with the new and the next. The mounds invite us to slow down. They encourage us to look back, to learn from our history, and to honor the stories and struggles of those who paved the way for us. For without knowing where we come from, how can we truly know where we are going? This brings us to the quiet miracle of cultural continuity. Empires rise and fall, languages evolve, and yet the essence of the Adena endures. Their specific traditions may have transformed, merging into the later Hopewell and Fort ancient cultures. But the foundational ideas did not vanish. The practice of mound building, the reverence for ancestors, the ceremonialism, these core tenets continued, adapted, and flowed into the cultural streams of subsequent peoples. The legacy of the Adena is not a static artifact in a museum. It is a living current that runs through the history of this land. It's a testament to the resilience of human culture, its ability to persist and evolve through centuries of change. It teaches us that what we create, what we believe, and how we treat one another has an impact that can outlast our own lives, shaping the world for generations we will never meet. And so, as we conclude our journey, the lesson of the Mounds settles upon us, peaceful and profound. It's a message of unity, of living in balance with our world, of remembering our past, and of trusting in the continuity of the human story. The Adena are not a lost people from a forgotten time. Their wisdom is written in the rolling hills of the Ohio Valley. Their legacy is woven into the very fabric of the American landscape. They are beneath our feet, in the earth that supports us. They are a quiet reminder that we, too, are ancestors of the future. The choices we make, the communities we build, the respect we show for our planet and for each other, this will be our mound. This will be our legacy. The story of the Adena is, in the end, a reflection of our own. It is a timeless call to live with purpose, with connection, and with a deep and humble grace. Thank you for joining me on this incredible exploration. It has been a privilege to share this story with you. If you've enjoyed this journey and want to explore more hidden histories, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support allows us to keep digging into the past and sharing its wisdom. Until next time, walk gently on the earth and listen closely to the stories it has to tell. And so, we arrive at the end of our journey, not with a definitive answer, but with a deeper sense of wonder. We've walked the same paths, stood in the shadows of the same ancient trees, and gazed upon the same monumental earthworks that have watched over this valley for millennia. The story of the Adena isn't found in dusty tomes or chiseled stone. It's written in the very land they shaped with their hands and their hearts. Imagine, for a moment, you are here. The sun, a fiery orb, dips below the western hills of the Ohio Valley. Its last rays paint the sky in hues of orange, purple, and deep indigo. The world holds its breath in that magical moment between day and night. As the light fades, the great mounds, which we have come to know so well, begin to transform. They lose their grassy, sunlit familiarity and become powerful. Dark silhouettes against a canvas of emerging stars. The great serpent mound uncoils against the twilight, a prehistoric constellation fixed to the earth. The Miamisburg Mound stands as a silent mountain, its peak seemingly scraping the lowest stars from the sky. This is the time when the world grows quiet. The hustle of our modern lives fades away, replaced by the gentle chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. It's in this profound stillness that you can almost feel the pulse of the past. The air itself seems thick with memory, with stories that have soaked into the soil over thousands of years. This isn't just dirt and clay beneath our feet. It is a repository of a civilization's spirit. Close your eyes. Listen. Go beyond the sounds of the night. Can you hear it? A soft, rhythmic murmur, like a distant heartbeat. It's the whispering earth. It speaks of a people who understood the cycles of the sun and moon, not through telescopes, but through patient observation and deep reverence. It whispers of rituals performed in the sacred circles, of dances that honored the changing seasons, and of chants that echoed through these valleys, calling upon the spirits of the sky and the underworld. The earth tells the story of the hands that carried basket after basket of soil, each load a prayer, a tribute to a revered leader, a step in building a connection between this world and the next. It speaks of a community bound together by a shared purpose, a collective belief strong enough to move mountains, or rather, to build them. They were astronomers, engineers, artists, and mystics. Their observatories were not built of granite, but of precisely aligned earthen walls that caught the first light of the winter solstice. Their greatest artworks were not hung in galleries, but were etched into the landscape itself. visible in their full glory only from the heavens they so admired. Think of the artifacts we've examined. The intricate pipes carved into the shapes of animals and people, not just tools for smoking, but conduits to the spirit world. Each one tells a story of a belief system, rich with symbolism, where the boundaries between human, animal, and spirit were fluid and interconnected. The whispers carry the memory of the shamans, their faces illuminated by firelight, their voices weaving tales of creation and cosmology that gave meaning to every sunrise and every starry night. The Adena did not leave us towering pyramids of stone like the Egyptians or the Maya. Their legacy is something far more subtle, more elemental. They built monuments of soil, spirit, and memory. Stone crumbles, empires fall, but the earth endures. Their story is not a shout across history, but a persistent whisper, waiting for those who are willing to be quiet and listen. It's in the way the mist clings to the river on a cool morning, in the way the moonlight filters through the trees and casts long shadows from the mounds. This land holds their joys, their sorrows, their knowledge, and their sacred mysteries. It remembers the first people who saw this valley not just as a place to live, but as a sacred canvas upon which to paint their understanding of the cosmos. They are not gone. They are woven into the fabric of this place. So, as we leave this final chapter, carry this with you. The next time you find yourself in a quiet, natural place, be it a forest, a field, or a riverbank, pause, take a deep breath, feel the ground beneath you and listen. Listen with more than just your ears. Listen with your heart and your imagination. Because if you listen closely enough, you might just hear it, the timeless, whispering earth, still telling the story of a people who knew that the most enduring monuments are the ones that become part of the land itself. The story of the Adena. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible exploration. It's been a privilege to share this journey with you. If you've enjoyed this series and want to continue exploring the mysteries of the past, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It truly helps us continue to bring these stories to light. Until next time, keep listening to the whispers of history.